Now, as I mentioned before, Australia's unemployment figure today, it's fallen from 3.7 to 3.6%. Now, that defied most experts' expectations. Joining me now, Sky News Business editor and the host of the new series, which I think debuts on Sunday night, called Secrets of My Success, my old mate Ross Greenwood. Now, Roscoe, before I ask you about this fabulous new show that we're all going to tune into on Sunday, take us through today's unemployment figures, because you know, on the one hand, it's good news that more people have got jobs, but immediately people, such as yourself, who know much more about this than me, said, well, that might mean we get another rate rise next month from the Reserve Bank.
Another one, Steve. You might get another two in the next 2 months. That's the real problem. And of course, there's already been the 12 rate rises that people have had to bear, which have basically doubled their mortgage costs during that period of time. And so this is the Reserve Bank trying to cool down, slow the economy. But there's clear evidence that the economy is slowing. But the labour market's something of an aberration. And so just to put it into some perspective, for the very first time in Australian history, there are now more than 14 million people in Australia who have got a job. The proportion of people working compared with our total population is at an all-time high. The female participation rate is at an all-time high. And guess what? Part of this also is not just that we need these workers in Australia, that there's a shortage of workers, skilled workers, basic workers as well. But the second aspect of it is that the families need the work, because when you've got mortgage payments going through the roof, when you've got your electricity and gas bills going through the roof, the broad cost of living rising as fast as it is, by necessity, especially in the capital cities, you need more than one income these days to be able to afford that ever-increasing mortgage.
When you strip out those numbers, Ross, I mean, are all these real jobs, or a lot of them part-time jobs? Are they full-time employment, or are they people taking second jobs?
No, they're full-time jobs. They are people with work, and it's full-time work in the main that's being created right now. In the past, it has been part-time or casual work that's been created, but in the past 12 to 18 months, it's been largely full-time jobs that have been created. So, you know, broadly, as we know, when you've got an unemployment rate at 3.6%, which is close to a 48-year low, anybody who wants a job broadly can get a job. Now, by contrast, there's only around 500,000 people who are unemployed in Australia. So when you compare the unemployed versus the employed in Australia, that's the other big contrast. But the problem is, if you have a shortage of labour, you then have pressure for wages to rise, and the Reserve Bank governor has talked about this. If you have pressure for wages to rise, you start to bake in the inflation, and that is precisely what the Reserve Bank's trying to get out of. So while the United States is starting to, ease off on the interest rate rise that did so overnight, because they're seeing their inflation rate falling back to 4%, with our inflation rate still sitting at 6.8%, and all of these pressures sitting in there, that's the reason why many people say that the Reserve Bank will continue to hit us with these higher interest rates.
Yeah, New Zealand into recession today. Looks like we may be headed somewhat that way ourselves. Now, I want to talk about Secrets of My Success. This is a show that you've been working on for some time, I know, because you've been telling me about some of the people you're speaking with. I was watching your program this afternoon. You start the episode with one-time male stripper Billy Cross, and I'll get to your visit at that strip event in Las Vegas in a moment. Here's what Billy Cross told you, though, about the incredible way he got his marketing plan put together for him by an American television program.
I get this call, I swear to you, like 4 days later. Hey, it's the producer from the Phil Donahue Show. We love what you're doing. We love your show. It's all about female empowerment. We want to fly you to New York, and we want to do a whole episode on Manpower Australia. He's got an audience of female having hens nights, what they call them, bachelorettes in America. So the opening line, Phil Donahue goes, "Welcome on stage, Manpower Australia, the thunder from down under." And I've gone, bopping.
Here is the thunder from down under, Manpower Australia.
Trademark.
It's a case of being in the right place at the right time, Ross, and taking that phone call and not thinking it's some sort of hoax and going and doing that show, and the rest is history by the look of it.
Well, it's so true. Phil Donahue at that time was bigger than Oprah, there's no doubt. But the irony of it, and part of the story that we'll tell you, is that 4 days earlier, he was in jail in Canada. He'd been locked up because he'd misbehaved there. And that's not a bad story also as to how he got out, thinking he basically destroyed everything that he built up. And so this is, you know, a young fellow who left home in Liverpool, basically the southwest suburbs of Sydney, didn't have his act to his name, the son of migrant families, Greek migrants. He went to the Gold Coast and he really was just finding work, but also just trying to get out of Liverpool. And then eventually was convinced to start taking his clothes off. As he says, at the time he had a bit of a rig on him, so he didn't mind so much. But eventually he had to give up the dancing, had to give up the body image thing because the business simply got so big. And that business, the Thunder from Down Under, I would suggest to you is better known in America than it is here in Australia because it is quite phenomenal, the success of Billy Cross. 22 years on the Strip in Las Vegas. They've got the keys to the city that Elvis got and so many other great acts got as well. And so this is the reason why this is, you know, not only an Australian success story, as we say, it's also an American success story as well.
I love how you dig out those rags to riches story on the Vegas Strip for 22 years. You also, you know, I'm a V8 supercar fan. I'm a big petrol head. You talk to Betty Clemenko. Now, she's got an incredible story. As we know, she was born to a King's Cross sex worker. She was then adopted by John Saunders. Now, John Saunders, tell us who John Saunders was and how Betty Clemenko's gone from that tough upbringing to owning what is at the moment the most successful V8 supercar franchise going around.
It is phenomenal, this story. So the secret here, I think, is being in the right place at the right time, which, you know, every V8 supercar driver really understands that it is split-second timing. In this case, it was absolutely split-second because after she'd been born, you know, unfortunate circumstances, her mum a prostitute, a heroin addict as well, had to give her up for adoption by complete coincidence, looking for a child at that time. And here was this little blonde-haired bouncing baby in the hospital who was Betty, John Saunders, who was Frank Lowy's partner when they created Westfield in Australia. And so she grew up, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. She got chucked out of the house. There was all sorts of dramas that went on along the way, which is a cracking story. But as you say, I mean, if you go to any V8 Supercars event, and I know you're a big fan, you know, you see Betty Clemenko, there's a crowd of people around her. She is literally the rock star in the pit lane. She signs the autograph. She's great with the kids, looks after them. And here she is. She's a pocket rocket. She's, you know, in old scale, I think barely 5 foot tall, got the tattoos, got the diamonds all over, the shocker blonde hair is there. She's an absolute, so her story is also a cracking story to tell.
She's an absolute legend. Now, given I'm a mate of yours, I've heard some of these tales along the way while you've been putting this together. This show sounds fantastic. Debuts, I think, on Sunday on Sky News at 8 o'clock. Knowing you, it will be absolutely brilliant. Those stories are great. I'll catch up with you soon, my friend.